Ofsted. Have you been in Ofsted inspections?
Yeah, it's a total waste of time.
But it's not a waste of time. We'll talk about it. We don't want to destroy that one. I've got a lot to say about it. I've been in at least 2 Ofsted inspections.
You've only had. How have you got away with 2?
Because
I seem to have one every freaking year.
Because I've tried to avoid being in British education.
Private the Royal Gagdala.
Yes. Well, Gagdala. No, I
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Sunday Roast. We're back with a wonderful guest, as always, Professor Tim. Professor, can you tell us a bit about yourself for anyone who's new to the show?
Well, I'm supposed to be a professor, but I've lost my university because my last university was in Moscow, so I can't go back. So I've been doing a little bit of teaching here, but mostly I make films now. And I last year I was doing panto. This year I'm not. I'm sort of messing around really, and trying desperately to work up an idea of doing animated opera, 2D animated opera. I'm so excited, so passionate about it. As for politics, it sort of takes over my life. So I'm without a university at the moment, I think, until Mr. Putin dies, but that may have already happened. And I'm also I'm also without a political party. That may have died as well. And so I don't know what I'm doing. I think I'm lurching violently to the left. Alex is waiting to receive me, isn't it? Like sort of guardian angel. Max, I have to say I'm deeply impressed by your tricorn hat.
Yes, it was made specially for me.
But you see, shouldn't there be a cockade at the front?
There should, and I'm going to have a look for one. Yes.
Oh, please do. I shall be awaiting it.
Thank you very much. It was made specially for me by fans of the show. Very kind of them, and it's
wow.
It's solid. It's made of hard leather, so it's really good.
Lovely.
Really happy with it.
Have you worn it outside?
No.
No.
Not yet.
But would it work outside? Like, if it rained, would it actually... I have no idea.
It'd probably fill up and then eventually leak from the front. But it would keep my head dry, yes.
Yes, that would be like a sort of gutter, wouldn't it? It'd be a political statement. Give one of those to Boris.
Oh, my goodness. Can we talk about Boris? What has he been up to?
You've got to introduce yourself.
Yes, introduce yourself. Yeah, we can't allow Boris to take over. He's taken over everything else.
Alex, can you tell us a bit about yourself, anyone who's new to the show, when you've recovered?
Oh, God, we're not going to do anything today. We're just going to laugh all the way through. I love it. Hi, I'm Alex. I'm also known as Political X. I'm a journalist and a historian and teacher of many things. Max, my wonderful co-host, can you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Max. I run the Robespierre channel, where I talk about British politics and Brexit in particular. So can we jump to what Boris has been doing at the COVID inquiry?
We can. I really want to talk about the Putin thing, so we're going to keep that at the end because I'd forgotten about that, Professor Tim. So we'll talk about that. Boris, COVID inquiry. What an absolute mess from start to finish, and so full of crap. But are we surprised? It was like the initial thing of getting him to do an oath. I was like, well, what's the point?
Well, it's actually before that. Before that, he arrived 3 hours early, so he wouldn't.
So that he could
avoid the grieving. Yeah, the grieving crowd.
Well, shouldn't Starmer have done the same thing in Glasgow?
Yes,
but he was nabbed on the train on the way up there. So I mean,
taken the helicopter.
How did Boris actually arrive? Did he sort of fly in like Mary Poppins, or pop down a chimney? Go ho ho! Down I go. That won't be the first time he's said that in the environs of Whitehall, will it? But don't you find it so extraordinary on the subject of stained sofas that the whole of the COVID thing is an attempt by Boris and Matt Hancock to whitewash to whitewash the entire thing. And Boris is now saying, I found the most extraordinary thing, I think it was today, and I could hardly take my eyes off it. I mean, I've been glued to it, and I hardly know what day is what now, because it's all the same sort of mush. But you've got, if we go back, we had Eddie Lister and Patrick Vallance and Dominic Cummings all saying that Boris said, let it rip. And then today, I think Boris said, well, I never said that. I just wanted to look at the divergence, to put it in context, all that sort of stuff. It just, the counter argument, was it the counter argument or something? So he's just denying absolutely that he ever said it. He's saying that let it rip was one of these things that he'd heard in the media or on the street. That's probably when he was partying down number 10 down the street, down Whitehall. I mean, where did he hear this? Because if he heard this, if the let it rip was an expression that he picked up from the media, then we must have some sort of source. We must be able to know that somebody said it first. As far as I know, Boris was the author of that expression. Let it rip. Oh.
But they also went for herd immunity, which has sort of been sidestepped.
Yes.
A little bit in that whole, I don't understand why the lawyers aren't pressing on that, because that's corporate manslaughter. End of. You are not allowed to. But it then also goes to that bigger thing. I think he lied as well, straight away. You go on this bigger thing, which was there were no, basically, it's almost like a castle. There are no walls. There's no way to trace where anyone's coming in and out of the city. So you end up just going, there is no way of protecting it. The walls in this case would have been hotels. What they should have done is said, right, we're locking down the country. You come into the country, you go and stay in a hotel for 2 weeks until the COVID's cleared in you, and then you come in and you can be normal. And in case there is anything that does get through, we've got a track and trace system to find you. And they openly admitted they don't have that.
It was already too late in January when that conversation was taking place.
Yes, but this is what was being done in places like Vietnam.
Yes.
They had the hotels. So they just said, you go and stay in there, we'll feed you, clothe you, it doesn't cost you anything. We'll wash your stuff. You just got to stay in a room for 2 weeks. I know it's rubbish, but tough luck. We're in a pandemic. And, I agree. It's not the best of scenarios. The best of scenario would have an instant vaccine that kills the virus straight away. But, we don't live in that age yet. But and yet with this...
I'll be living in that age. We will have another COVID pandemic in the next 5 or 10 years. It is absolutely certain. We may indeed even have another COVID variant pinging its way at the moment towards us.
It seems like it's in Europe at the moment.
Are we ready?
No.
I don't think we are. And I don't think the COVID inquiry is looking at that. The COVID inquiry is looking, as ever in British inquiries, at apportioning blame and trying to finger this person or that person. And it doesn't do any good.
Whitewashing again.
The people with the greatest rhetorical flourishes are just going to get away with it. I mean, we got a thing this morning, the inquiry into Philip Schofield, so whitewashing ITV and saying, well, as far as we can see, nobody knew because there was a culture of not telling anybody.
They knew.
And that's the same stuff with Jimmy Savile.
Yes. Absolutely. And apparently one person, one low-ranking. Have I said that word correctly? One low-ranking individual apparently knew, but didn't dare say anything in 2017. And
well, that's the industry, though, isn't it? You can't, in many industries, you can't go and dob someone in because then you'll lose your job because no one will ever trust you.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Which is, you can argue that was the same thing in white. So I worked in football for over a decade. I got quite high up. I got high up in qualifications and I read a ton. And obviously one of the people that you read about is a guy called Sir Alex Ferguson. Oh, yeah. And I was listening on the inquiry about what was going on inside Downing Street. And basically Boris in that inquiry came out and said, yeah, it's really cutthroat. People stab each other in the back. It's the normal thing to do. That's politics. That's how you run a system. And I went, wait a minute, what did Alex Ferguson say? And I had this amazing story that I remember. They had they used to give out charity balls. So every week you'd have to sign 20 to 30 charity balls and they get all the players, as soon as they come through the front door, sign them. On one particular week, the person in charge, Wendy, couldn't get the signatures. And the captain came in, Roy Keane, and saw that there were 5 signatures out of about 28, 30 players, 5. And Wendy was really upset and in tears. Roy goes upstairs to Sir Alex, tells him what's happened. And Sir Alex comes down and apparently murdered the players. And the point he said, which is relevant to Boris, was Wendy's part of our team, and Wendy is part of our culture, and Wendy is an important person because we're a family. But when you listen to Boris, he is literally the anti-Sir Alex Ferguson. He's an anti-Alex. We have 3 Alexes. We have me, Boris, and Sir Alex. And he is the anti-Alex Ferguson. Everything he was saying in that inquiry was the opposite in terms of leadership and culture building that Sir Alex did. And Sir Alex is considered the best. He now lectures at Harvard. So he's held in pretty high regard from Manchester United, the biggest football club, to one of the top universities in the world. And Boris, I'm listening to all of this and no one's bringing it up, that this man has no leadership qualities. Go on, Tim.
Well, I think part of that is because the Conservative Party is vengeful and he has no security. And we know that because he's now out of the job. But if you look back to Liz Truss, she with the hands, you can see how quickly they got rid of her and how quickly they're planning to get rid of Rishi Sunak, except the chairman has just said it would be insanity to get rid of him at this stage. It would be, I think he said it would be insanity. Of course it would be insanity, but without that sense of security, yes, the ultimate boss is as anxious and nervous about being stabbed in the back as anybody else.
But in football, we would say the same thing. You're only as good as your last game. And with it, I can cite the guy who won with Leicester Football Club, Claudio Ranieri. He won it, but I think a third of the way through the next season, first time in their history they won the league, and third of the way through the new season, he was fired. It's that cutthroat. And you've got assistant managers, you've got players. If the team is not winning, the players start going over to the owner and going, oh, it's the manager's fault, even though we're on the pitch.
I was going to say the same thing is true in the theatre, but you've got a lot greater camaraderie when you're actually doing a show. You just recognize when that show finishes and you go on to another show, and you probably never see the people again. When you do see them after 10, 15 years, it's as if you only just walked out of the door from them last time. There's an immediate rapport, but I think that's how that works, and it would be greater. It would be so much better if politics were the same.
No, just like if you think about during the pandemic and during the parties, the people who were cleaning up after the parties, they were exposed to COVID. There was no respect for those people. And when it comes to about blaming, Johnson is like a manager who's blaming the referee because the match was lost. It's always about blaming someone else.
So Alex Ferguson used to do
claiming, that. Or claiming in Johnson's case that he doesn't know, and that I accept full responsibility, but it wasn't. You've got it wrong. You just didn't know what it was like. A different culture, and he assumes that because it's all behind closed doors, you can have no comprehension of what it would be like in the rat run of number 10.
But then you compare it to the other people that we've looked at in history or recent prime ministers. I mean, we were having a debate last week about whether or not Dominic Raab was actually prime minister or not. Just to add to the never-ending list. And then we've got what appears to be some sort of grumblings in the background that they might replace sooner because someone thinks they can do a better job. And they also cite Boris having come in with 6 months and just changed the party and made it, so successful. Max, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I'm just thinking when you say about replacing Sunak, I think Suella Braverman obviously wants to replace him, but I think she'd prefer Sunak to lose the election and her to take over than take over now, because whoever's going to take over is a poison chalice. There's no chance of winning. It's just, you will be the one who will be blamed. So it's better for whoever wants to replace Sunak to allow him to crash and burn.
You would think, wouldn't you? But then the grumblings we're hearing out the background is bye Rishi.
I think people are beginning to realise that the damage which is being done to the Conservative Party at the moment could be terminal. And what Rishi Sunak is facing at the moment is a rebellion from the One Nation Tories, which is the largest group, which has been for the most part quite quiet since Brexit, and this very vocal number of, it's probably no more than about 30 MPs on the right of the party, ERG, New Conservatives, whatever they want to call themselves, they keep rebranding themselves because they haven't an identity, and they don't have very much sense of loyalty to politics, let alone to Parliament, let alone to the Conservative Party, because they go off and start moonlighting on GB News or Talk TV, and it's not as if in the case of Lee Anderson, he's a gift to broadcasting. I mean, yeah, he's an oaf.
Yes.
What was it? Nadine Dorries can barely string a sentence together. I mean, yeah, her auto cues seem to have got smaller and smaller.
For a change, a man who was going to clear up a woman's mess. That's Rishi's vow as he enters number 10. As you were, Sunak's stability extends to the cabinet with the big beefsteak and all cages but Braverman back at home in the Home Office. Sorry, I've just completely messed up.
But have you read the plot? Oh, it's a page turner. It's a page turner. None of it is based on reality, but then nor is a lot of modern politics. But it is fascinating. And comparing the plot and Spare, or what's the other dreadful thing that's come out recently? There's one other one that has come out, and there's no comparison. The plot is readable. Spare is not, except to learn about the Todger cushion. But please don't go there. I was riveted by the plot. I couldn't stop turning the pages. But
I think did you read the whole thing? And how long did it take?
About 2 hours or so. I mean, I don't think I didn't dwell on any page. I was fairly rapid. Did
it reflect politics or her personal life? I've got no clue about any of it.
It was one stage racier than her novels.
Did it involve someone with blonde hair?
It did involve a lot of
quite portly.
Yeah. I don't think I'm trying to remember now whether I projected it, but I don't think there was any reference to the sofa. But there was reference to a billiards table, which was
my goodness.
Yeah. Let's change that subject.
Yeah. So sorry. But anyway,
Hey, you didn't write it.
Well, I don't think she did either. But I can't say that, can I? Whoops.
Chat GPT or actual ghostwriter, do you think?
I don't know, but so from a professional point of view, I mean, I spent my life looking at text and trying to work out who wrote it first, textual analysis, and I've always prided myself on knowing when a student is cheating, and sometimes I just let them get on with it. But when I look at Nadine Dorries' novels, and I've read all of them, I read them all while I was sort of going in for cancer surgery. I thought, got to do something useful, and they were a riot. So when I read those, and then I look at her tweets, and then I look at the plot, there is no common thread. They all have a different style. I mean, there are little moments where you think, oh yeah, that's a familiar phrase, or that's a familiar rhythm in the sentence. But I look for rhythms, and the rhythms are all over the place. They're different rhythms in each in each oeuvre. So either she's got particular periods like Picasso, and this must be the gold period. But I don't want to speculate on the periods of Nadine Dorries. But yeah, it's I don't know what's going on there. So I wouldn't like to say that one is a ghost, one has been ghost written and another one has not, because
of course these are all allegations.
Yeah, I couldn't identify what the original is, because if you remember, if you remember that brilliant speech she gave in Parliament where she talked about the responsibility of an MP.
I put my constituency before my party. I think it is vital that these amendments are voted for. I think it's vital because some of the arguments that have been put forward tonight, that, so many people, you could be removed from your constituency because of your position on a particular policy. If you're a good MP, that's nonsense. That you could be removed because there was a political row against you. I can assure you that the 766 people who I am sure signed that petition were all members of the opposition. So it isn't enough. It's like, during the 2009 expenses crisis, one thing we did know was this, that everybody nationally hated MPs, but when it came to a constituency by constituency basis, many constituencies said, well, you know, we don't like MPs, but our MP's okay. And that's because they know what you do for them. They know the type of person you are. Where MPs do fall down is when they ignore their constituents.
It's bewitching, and I thought this is somebody to watch. So when she was appointed a minister, I thought, oh, this is interesting. She's got a background in writing. She's got that passion, and she was useless. And I thought the same sort of thing about Jenrick. I thought, oh, he's somebody to watch. And when he actually got power, he was horrible.
It was
the Braverman was another one. And so clearly I can't choose people, because the people that I choose let me down immediately in the political arena. And so yeah, I clearly I'm useless.
No, 100% not. I no, can't have that. I will say this:
people get.
There was something interesting when she was sports minister, where she managed to almost fluff up the description of every single playing field.
What's your department? What do you do?
So I'm Secretary of State for the Department of Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, which means that we're responsible for making sure you have super fast broadband in your home. That means you can downstream your movies. We're responsible for making sure the internet's a safe place for you to go to. We want to make the internet in the UK the safest internet in the world. We're responsible for everything to do with sport, for making sure you've got football pitches and that you have tennis pitches in your communities where you can play in exercise your sports, museums, theatres, culture, music. It's a huge department, very diverse, so much in there, and a lot of it relates to you.
Yes,
that each sport used. That was almost like spectacular.
Oh, yeah, but she
nonsensical.
She also mixed up rugby league and rugby union in the same speech. In the same speech. I live in rugby, so I feel I ought to know. When I was a child, I was made to play rugby, and I don't quite know how this happened because I have haemophilia. But I think the school nurse probably just thought, take an aspirin, dear. I only survived because when the ball came anywhere near me, I ran in the other direction. and sometimes I used to crouch behind the big H. You know, there's these two big H's as if you're trying to learn a little bit of the alphabet on either end of the pitch. I used to crouch behind one of them and try and read pages of The Lord of the Rings, which I took on the pitch with me.
Good book.
So my image of Treebeard is quite distinctive.
Your personal image?
Yeah. it's letter H.
You're a Lord of the Rings fan, Max, aren't you?
Yes.
Do you think Tolkien could write anything as good as what's happening now politically?
I don't know. How would you write something like this?
Well, he's a fantasist. He's a fantasy writer.
Yes, but it's positive.
I mean, what Tolkien would start off with the language, and so each character or each group would have to speak a different language. And as we know, the right wing of the Conservative Party speaks a language which is almost incomprehensible. Notwithstanding, have you ever heard of a notwithstanding clause before? I really haven't. I've looked at a lot of law. And what I find so extraordinary about law is basically a memory game. And then you've got these coded words which only mean something when you're a lawyer. And notwithstanding is one of these words. When you use notwithstanding in a legal document, it means you ignore the paragraph above it. And so a notwithstanding clause. Why not just say a clause which obliterates what I've just said? It's very strange. And how can you define something into existence unless you're Anselm? It makes no sense.
Well, obviously that comes in with Rwanda. The British government are now declaring.
Yes, I've done a quick jump over to Rwanda. Rwanda is about the bill which is going through Parliament, or will go through Parliament maybe tomorrow, or whenever Rishi gets round to it, or James Cleverly, or whoever is going to replace Robert Jenrick gets round to it. It's going to have notwithstanding clauses in it to get round our legal obligation to international law and to overturn the judgment of the Supreme Court, to say that what the Supreme Court have judged to be unsafe is legally defined as safe.
But even Rwanda has said that they're not going to break international law to help Britain.
Yes, but it just
There was
it
a sort of
depends on what Rwanda defines as international law, because Rwanda has already got quite a lot of international laws that it's got a very casual relationship to. For example, killing refugees,
yes,
or assassinating political opponents, or,
but
abducting people.
there was also an a colonial angle to it as well that didn't go down very well. I don't know if that was true or not, but there were some commentators mentioning the fact that Britain was coming over and saying, well, you'll do what we tell you to do. That didn't go down very well.
But it wasn't Rishi today talking about the Commonwealth, or was it somebody yesterday? I'm losing track of this. Someone in the last two days or so has made reference to the Commonwealth in respect.
Farage did, I think.
That's a long.
I think he was confronted
in the
in
jungle.
a celebrity, and he was saying, "Oh, doesn't matter that Jamaica are getting rid of the king as their head of state, because Mozambique is joining the Commonwealth."
Oh, right. I haven't followed Farage in are you watching it in a sort of bewitched
No.
way?
I'm watching someone else's
boycotting.
Right. I don't watch this filth really. Every so often I feel I have to in order to comment on it, but I took one look at Farage's bottom and ran a mile. Really, I feel I only want to have this at a distance.
Anyway, back on Rwanda.
Yes,
they had a colonial aspect.
Were we on Rwanda, or were we on Boris? I think we might have been on Boris.
We somewhat, just because of the time was going, we'd somewhat moved on to Rwanda because we sort of tied it in, because obviously the notwithstanding clause, and so there's this element of they're just going to declare that Rwanda is safe, so it's safe. I mean, this is the type of stuff that religions do, where they turn around and go, the Earth is in the center of the universe, so it's in the center of the universe.
Unborn babies no longer go to limbo. So
yes, well, I think well, as a deeply premature baby, and having been born into, well, I have so many religions running around my family, it's absurd. But I was adopted as a baby, which I didn't know until I was 26 or something. And so I was baptized as a baby because I was expected to die.
Oh wow!
This must have been done by my original birth mother. So I didn't understand quite why I had this baptism and confirmation as a small child. But that was why it was all thoroughly understandable with hindsight. But living in the middle of it all, it was a little bit unusual. So yes, I had an early experience of avoiding limbo, but now having flirted with the Conservative Party, I've thrown myself fully into it. But Rwanda,
can we come back to that for a moment? So what's your relationship now with the Conservative Party?
Oh, I'm afraid it's non-existent. I've actually surrendered my Conservative Party card. Well, I don't think we have a card anymore, but I did contact them and say I no longer wish to be a member, and it's quite a strange feeling. Because like Michael Foot, I felt it was important to persist, even though I didn't approve of what they were doing, and try and reform things from the inside. But I'd gone a long way to the point of considering selection for a seat, and some various people had written to me saying that I should become an MP, and I could tout those letters around the place. I wouldn't be rude enough to actually indicate who had done that, but they were significant.
I'm assuming you wouldn't run now.
No, I couldn't. And the reason I didn't run then was because I'd had a run-in with Theresa May, and I thought, at the point when I was due to complete all this, I would have been running in an election. Theresa May would have been the boss, and I thought I can't do this, because I remember her hectoring me, and I remember thinking it was a toss-up between her and Andrea Leadsom. I can't think which one was worse. Andrea Leadsom did the same thing to me, and the thought they were sort of running off against each other, I mean, that could only end in tears, and it did, and it was just madness. It's not about policy, and it's not about strength of character. It's about control. It's about bullying, and whoever is the more accomplished bully gets the prize. But there are people within the Conservative Party Some of them have been there more recently than others, but there are people, as there are in the Labour Party and in the Liberal Party, who are generally invested in helping people. And I think that there is a trope in the more left-wing traditions of saying everybody who is a Tory is a bad thing. Everybody, all Tories are nasty. That's not been my experience. In the same way, I mean, I have very good friends in every single level of real politics, and I think many of them are very passionately care about their constituents and are very good constituency MPs. I remember when I was a student, I used to have dinner once a week with a man who had been the Labour representative of the area, and he'd retired. He'd gone into the Lib Dems. He was part of the gang of, well, he wasn't part of the gang of four. He was number 5, but he'd been a senior minister, and he lost his seat. But I remember what an incredibly personable and wise man he was, and he was a gentleman. And I think in the cut and thrust of modern politics, a lot of that has been lost. I think they still exist.
I don't know if you're
not in the Jacob Rees-Mogg
no
version.
But I'm just, as you mentioned, I think of a Conservative MP, Simon Hoare, who was the former chair of the Northern Ireland Affairs Committee, and somebody who really understood what was going on in Northern Ireland and took a very fair and firm approach.
I also think that Chris Heaton-Harris is probably the best thing that the Conservative Party could have handed over to Northern Ireland at the moment, and he's done miracles to patch up the mess that was left in Northern Ireland by Brexit. Because Lord Frost, I use the word stupid occasionally, and I think that's the line to use. Lord Frost is monumentally stupid. He left out 2 things which had to be dealt with if Brexit was going to survive. One was finding an alternative to Dublin 3 to stop the boats, and the other one was finding a formula to ensure that Northern Ireland was at least related to Ireland, the island of Ireland, as well as secure within Britain, and he did neither.
There was never a way that could be done. I can't.
Well, the compromise that Chris Heaton-Harris seems to have got is about as good as you can get, but it was significantly better than the rubbish which Boris came up with.
Yes,
that was total tripe.
But it's still not good enough for the DUP.
But it never will be.
Well, you could say it never. You could say it never will be. But the DUP were given such a taste of power by Theresa May that it's now gone to their head, and they're now uncontrollable.
But they're still voting along with the Tories.
Yes, but it doesn't matter. They're not in Stormont.
Yeah.
So they make a nonsense of the idea of local representation.
The only thing that seems to solve it was being in the EU. You had everything. It literally solved everything.
Being in the EU, yeah, absolutely. It solved it effectively. The nonsense of the independence vote in Scotland, when we were already in the EU, it was nonsensical to have an independence vote at that point. It's not nonsensical now, oddly.
Ain't going to happen soon.
But equally, I don't think that a vote for independence in Scotland would automatically propel Scotland into the EU. If it did, I mean, I would go back to Scotland immediately. I spent a very nice time in Scotland when I was an undergraduate, and I'd be very happy, except for the cold. But then it's cold here.
I reckon they'd fast track it because the EU would recognise so many things positive to come out of that, and I think the whole of Brexit would collapse if they voted for independence. I think that would be the end. That would be the thing that would just tip it over the edge. The reason being is that you would then start to get into an issue of having a border. You would also have the EU probably fast tracking for multiple reasons. One, because they would recognise that Scotland was yanked out with no say, even though they didn't want to go. And not just from the referendum vote, but also from the Scottish independence vote. Part of the promise was, if you vote out, you leave the EU as well, and you'll have to reapply, which would have caused economic chaos. And so there's that.
I think it's. I don't want to disagree with you too much, but I think it's important also to remember that the EU is like a ministry. We tend to look at the EU as like a country, and we can sort of negotiate with it, and it would treat Scotland in a different way because of because of the history and stuff like that. I think if Scotland became independent, it would join like any of the other nations. There may be some exceptions like Ukraine, but generally I think Scotland would be treated like any other country that wants to join, and it would take a while. So, but it would already have in place what's necessary to join.
Yeah.
So it would be very.
So the problem it would face is the same problem that Britain faced on leaving Europe, that it would automatically have to impose a border and restrictions without any benefits at all.
And then they would have to do everything in their power to fast track back into the EU. I think there might be some sympathy within the EU towards Scotland because they were forced out and they had no.
Yeah,
I think there's a possibility.
Yeah, the difference between Scotland and Scottish independence and Britain and Brexit is that the Brexiteers had no idea about what they would have afterwards, whereas Scotland had a very clear idea about what it would have afterwards, and so that gives it a lot more impetus. I also, I have a lot of respect for Humza Yousaf, and I had dealings with him when I was exposing UKIP as racist, and but you know the story, I think.
It's a good story.
And Humza and I chatted, and he said to me, well, I've just had this racist experience, or I've just been racially abused by a UKIP MEP. What are you going to do about it? And I said, well, I'll resign. And he said, oh, let's go big. And I thought, that's very exciting. And I found myself slapped across the newspapers and wheeled off into the BBC for a session with Farage. And Farage said, Farage wouldn't rebuke this MEP man whose name was Coburn, and so well, it's just a joke, and can't you take a joke? And I thought, well, when you confuse somebody's real name, Humza Yousaf, with the name of a criminal, Abu Hamza, is not a joke. It's a racist comment. And that seems to me to be the very definition of racism. I didn't intend it is not an answer, because you don't realize you're being racist because you're so privileged that you don't realize what you're doing, and that is racism, when you are not thinking about somebody else and when you are defining somebody else simply by racial characteristics rather than as an individual.
He was doing that in the jungle. He was having an argument with some of the other contestants, essentially saying, what's wrong with dressing up like a Mexican? And people were saying, I think there's a more nuance and there's other perspectives, but the group was saying, well, it depends on how you want to reflect it. If you're taking the Michael out of them, then that's a problem. And then he said, and then someone brought up, well, that's why they don't generally wear Native American headdress, because it's considered it can be considered, it's especially in certain
appropriation, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's why you don't do blackface. Exactly. And then you can sort of see it was ticking over in his head a little bit. But there's this arrogance, and there's this I'm going to say someone who just thinks that they should be able to do whatever they want attitude, and there was an element and I think there's also an element of ignorance, of knowing what the issue is and where it comes from. I doubt very much he's got a clue as to why there's an issue over blackface.
Yes.
And I would be more surprised if he knew. I'll put it that way.
Well, there's a good question on the blackface issue. I mean, should you have blackface in what's the thing where you're hitting sticks with Morris dancing?
God, that's tough. Because some of that blackface is meant to represent pay. So the whole thing with that, I believe, I'm happy to be wrong on this, is that's meant to have pagan origins.
Yes, exactly.
And it'll be a reflection of that pagan origin. And then you get this sort of overlap between the two, where essentially you've got a religion which is Morris.
Well, then that wouldn't be blackface. It would be face painting. So
but it could equally cause offence, you see.
But then it depends on the context, because the point of blackface is the fact that you're saying, or at least its origins was saying, we don't want a certain type of person on stage, and therefore we're going to put a white person up on stage and mirror them instead. Whereas within the Morris dancing, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's because it's got a pagan tradition, which is thousands of years old. That's not the context as to why it was designed like that. unless there's something else I'm missing.
Yeah, you see when you come to the minstrel shows, which is what you're referring to, you've got the origins of that in America are clear, and there we can make a condemnation. However, when the minstrel show came to the UK, we didn't have that tradition, and so people blacking up on UK stages, particularly in the music hall, it was just people blacking up.
So there's more nuance to that. So Al Johnson, who is the jazz singer and was considered at the time in the Roaring '20s in America to be one of the most prolific cinema jazz singers of his age.
Yes.
If you read, he did blackface.
Yes.
But if you read what he also did, he was able to go into Harlem, and he was allowed into what was supposed to be only black clubs.
Absolutely.
And the argument that was put forward was that he was demanding that African American musicians and actors also be allowed on stage.
Absolutely.
And he was using his power to influence that, which
and
a lot of people
succeeded in so many ways. He succeeded.
Yes, he did.
I mean, you might say that was tokenism as well.
Yes, you could. Yeah. But
it's a big issue.
Yeah, it's huge.
And I don't think Farage is up to debating that. I mean, Farage has spent 20 years learning how to talk about one subject, and he does it very, very well, and that's Brexit. And any other subject, if you get him off any other subject except possibly military history, he cannot talk. And so he's coming across, I believe, in Love Island. As I say, I'm not talking about this with any authority, because I took one look at his bottom and I haven't switched the program on again. And
you've gotten rid of your TV just to be on the safe side.
No, anyway, but when it comes to ITV, I mean, I don't seem to go on to ITV anymore. Having decided there's no point in watching is it This Morning with Philip Schofield? Yes. It's Philip Schofield or Nigel Farage, and it bottoms in both places. And I just think, no, I'm not going there. And so now I'm left with BBC.
But I think, Tim, you raised a very valid point about how he only had one thing. But generally, most people are willing to listen. So most people are, okay, I don't know something, but I'm willing to listen to the experts, or I'm willing to listen to somebody else's opinion. But Farage is not like that. And my biggest issue with Farage is I don't know if he's really like that or it's all a show, because he knows he can make money out of it. He knows he can, if he doubles down on stuff, his supporters love it. And I don't know if this is all just, I know his history with the National Front and stuff like that, but I don't know if he's still like that, if he really is racist, or it's all just a pretense.
His history with the National Front is very interesting, because the person who I think was his campaign manager in Brighton or wherever he was, Eastleigh or something, wherever he was standing the last time he stood for a parliamentary election, had a background, I believe, in the National Front or English Defence League or whatever it was. You'll have to check it up. But and my experience of UKIP was that the average UKIP member was definitely not racist. Most of them were disgruntled Tories, and but that bureaucratic level above the candidate, most of them had a rather questionable background that I identified. Maybe I just met the wrong people, but I was alarmed, and certainly when I stood up and tried to call them out, I was extremely worried about the possibility of getting a brick through my front window.
Wow.
And I think had I not been, I would have delayed my actions, despite Holmes's encouragement, and I would have caused more damage. But I also had to go back and teach. So I was due to go back to Russia, and I had to give some lectures, and I was mindful of that as well. And all of this at the beginning of an election campaign.
I remember reading about, on Channel 4 brought it up, on Farage at school being caught going through a village late at night. I can't remember. I think it was a teenager.
Yeah.
Singing Hitler Youth songs.
Yes.
And that was in a period where, I still managed to grow up in a period where it would have been difficult to get access to that information. Like, what book in your school library is going to have that type of information? What local library is going to have that information? To which you then go, no. So where did he get? It's not like, I mean, that's German.
It's not
as
like
well.
there was an internet. There wasn't.
Oh.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. No, in his day, like even in my day and age, that would have been difficult to get a hold of.
Yeah.
So you then end up going, okay, so that's one thing. His comments on James O'Brien about languages, I really had a good think about this. I twigged. He's complaining about foreign languages. Well, there's Welsh, Scots, Gaelic. The Channel Islands have French. Gibraltar has Spanish, and there's Cornish.
And Manx.
So when he's complaining about other languages, how the hell do we know that people weren't just all like he was on a train full of Welsh people going off to a freaking match?
Yes.
And you're just going, you're such an arse, and it's such a narrow-minded view of Britain. They forget that actually, like the multiculturalism stuff, we've got several nations built into the UK.
Yes.
And yet they're saying multiculturalism has failed.
Yeah.
He's just like, you're in another planet. And yet I've never heard anyone on the news say just that one basic thing. Nonetheless, all the other stuff, the friggin' royal family's German. That never gets brought up.
And Greek.
And
Don't
Greek.
forget, King Charles is
and Greek. And democracy's Greek. And our mathematics is Persian. And our top dish is Indian. I mean, what the... they're off their rocker. They really are. Like, but the media... I mean, this is part of the reason Max and I set this up.
Yeah.
So we could hear other perspectives. Maybe there's an element of an echo chamber, but also just to bring some balance to the insanity what you're seeing on TV, because most of the people on there, and I hate to say it, are idiots. How is it that, you know, Max and I, who are professional, semi-professional on YouTube, can figure this stuff out, but people on ITV either don't want, or Channel 4 or Sky or the BBC can't make these basic points. Well, this is like basic stuff.
When you're on television, you go through producer after producer after producer before you even get in front of a camera. By the time you're in front of a camera, you're bored. You're exhausted of all this stuff, of going through all these junior producers who don't know what they're talking about anyway. They're not interested in the subject. They're interested in their next career gig. And you know, and so the dominance of things like this morning, the dominance of these magazine shows is, I think, killing TV as much as the dominance of reality TV. These two formulae are incredibly destructive. Sofa television and reality TV, they're both incidentally cheap, and that is what's and that doesn't get us on YouTube. In YouTube, you know, we're a one-man band almost. In my case, I really am a one-man band, and sometimes you just think, oh, I've got to churn this stuff out, and it can take a long time, but you want to be authentic, you want to be correct as much as possible, and you want the comments to come in, and you want people to question you. And in my case, I particularly want people to disagree with me, because I think that's the way we learn. And so I reach out as much as I possibly can to people who I know don't share my views, and there's plenty of people on the comments who assume I belong in one particular tribe and not in another tribe. And I think, well, actually, I don't belong in any tribe at the moment. And I don't think I belonged in a tribe for a very long time. Certainly not since Brexit.
No.
And I think even before then, I don't think I did.
I think you're in the roast tribe. I think you're on the roast tribe.
You're very kind. You're very kind.
And you're in the lava lamp tribe.
Yes, the lava lamp. All hail the lava lamp. You've not got it with you, have you? Because you're the roast breakfast roast on tour. So it's like the Tony Blackburn show, but with more laugh. And but we have two teachers here, don't we?
We do. We do. Oh no, actually, Max, weren't you a teacher as well?
Did you, Max? Did you ever have to suffer OFSTED?
No, I did not. I never had that pleasure.
I've managed to avoid it most of the time, because
Can you explain what OFSTED is to maybe somebody who's not from the UK?
Alex, you've had more OFSTED than me. Come on.
So there's two ways of looking at it. One is you can say that the government have created an inspection group for schools to come in and analyze what's going on in the school, and they'll talk to teachers, they'll talk to students, they'll talk to admin staff, they'll talk to the head, and they'll go around into classrooms and grade and go, oh, have you got a lesson plan? And have you organized yourself? And are your students happy? And are you doing everything you can? Then they'll check out the facilities as well and go, that looks very nice, and the fire door works, and this looks like a nice thing that's inspiring children, and etc. The alternate view, which is probably more from the teachers, is that it's a frigging waste of time, that essentially they turn up for about a week. They give you, I think it was in my day anyway, I think a week to 2 weeks notice. So all that would happen is the teachers would be coasting. They find out the Ofsted's turning up. They then make sure everything's ready to go. All the paperwork's done. Everyone's stressed out for 2 weeks. Ofsted turn up. They have a wander around and look and check everything out. Mark and disappear. Stress disappears, and then everyone just ignores everything they've done in terms of the paperwork.
It's like a safety inspection.
Just carry on as usual.
Yeah, there's a lot of safeguard. There's a lot of safeguarding. Paper checking, a lot of box ticking. In my experience, I think I've only done it twice, maybe 3 times. I can't remember. But the 2 times I've done it have been more recently, and they were horrific. And the school realized it hadn't, in both cases, hadn't had an inspection for a while, so it was gearing up, and it employed staff to get itself through. And and there was a complete sort of game change, and I think in one of the cases I was part of the staff that was employed to push the thing through. But it became incredibly oppressive, with an obsession with bureaucracy. And what I found is where there was bullying, it intensified. And there's an idea that bullying is all about an individual who's out of control. My experience, having witnessed bullying in the UK and in Russia, because in Russia I was teaching teachers how to teach, and very rarely did I get an opportunity to do my real subject, which is theology. And just before Putin did all his stuff, I got back to the chair of theology, which was lovely, and I was all set for conferences and all these other things. But no, I'm back in the UK, and but the teaching was fascinating, and I went around schools, and I observed, and I set up systems which would get a school through a British Ofsted inspection. And I thought, those systems are good. The problem is when you're trying to set them up at the last minute, it seems to give a license to people who want to throw their authority around. And if there is this germ of bullying in the school, you see it in the playground, you see it in the staff room, and it becomes oppressive. And you suddenly think, so if you're teaching a sort of a subject which isn't considered STEM, which of course is me all the way through, so religious studies or English, or something sort of whimsy and arty, you just think, well, you're a lightweight, and particularly with religious studies or PHSE or whatever it's sometimes called, nobody takes it seriously, and in fact that's one of the subjects which, if we get it right, should be one of the core subjects in a school, because that can change society. And it used to be the only subject which was legally required in a school. Until the Baker stuff came in, and we started to have a national curriculum. The only subject which was legally required, which is why an act of worship is required in each school, I think every week or whatever it is. But originally it was, you had to teach religion in every school, and I would love to see proper religious education done, so that students would come out of a school with a knowledge of the diversity of culture that we have in our country. But the problem is the textbooks are appalling, and the teaching is often done from the point of view of a teacher's own faith. So I've seen schools teaching Judaism as an aspect of Christianity. This is the Old Testament, and you think, and I've seen people doing things in terms of main religions where, oh yes, Hanukkah is a type of Christmas, and you just think this is
wow. It is actually Hanukkah this week, by the way.
Yes, indeed,
yeah.
Absolutely. No, we're all terribly excited, and there's a place just outside London where there was a dispute about whether the menorah could be lit in the outside the council offices, and finally the council relented and said yes, but people were worried. You know, and it's just wrong when we recognize the Christmas tree is there to celebrate Christmas. Hanukkah, the menorah is there to celebrate Hanukkah. It's an important celebration of cultural identity, and to be able to share that with other cultures, I think, is a great positive, and to be able to recognize it for what it is. And then you've got these silly people who say, oh, well, the Christmas tree is just pagan. Well, the Christmas tree goes back to St. Boniface in the 6th or 7th century, and the menorah goes back way beyond that time to the 1st century BC or 2nd century BC, or BC. I shouldn't even say that now, should I? I'm not allowed to say that. BCE.
Before COVID.
But yeah, before, but
Year zero.
The point is, BC and AD. I'm very reluctant to embrace the BCE and CE, because our society and our language is defined by the Christian traditions that we've inherited. So even if we were to sort of say, oh, I'm being very atheistic, you walk down your street is defined by roads which are named after saints, by church steeples and so on, and we can't get away from the cultural baggage of religion. And I think
it's interesting, because the surveys came out with the statistics. It was quite interesting to see that quite a lot of the far right went a bit mad over it, but 40% said that they were. 40% of the UK population said they were atheist. But I've always felt it's actually more than that, because
it doesn't make any difference when the first day of the week is defined as Sunday. Actually, no, that doesn't work in this case, does it? It would work if I were in Greece.
Yeah.
I was thinking in the wrong language there. Sorry.
I'm an atheist, but I understand the value, the cultural value of religion, and here in Italy, you just look around.
Lord's Day. Yep.
Lord's Day.
Italian. There you are. There you got. Yeah. We've got one language.
Domingo.
So for
no, it's Dominic.
Goodbye. I say goodbye to you.
Yes.
And that's a Christian greeting, isn't it? God be with you.
Yeah.
Bless
God
you when you sneeze.
And much of our swearing is entirely religious.
Pretty much. But then a lot of it's
further
also
south in Europe you go, the stronger it becomes, the more religious it becomes.
Absolutely.
But then there's also Norse. Woden, Wednesday.
Yes,
Thor, Thursday.
And we're not.
Well, I don't think we know what Friday. No, is it Tuesday or Friday? We don't know.
Freya stag.
Freya is Friday.
Is that to do with fish?
Saturn. What?
Is that to do with fish? Friday?
No.
No, it's to do with Freya, the goddess of life. I think she guarded the apples of immortality.
Oh wow, didn't know that.
I'm sure somebody in the comments is going to correct me there.
Yes.
Not
you, but
when it comes to Norse mythology, once I've got beyond Ganuga Gap, I'm a bit lost. But I do like the idea that, there was a cow that licked out the form of I think the father of Odin or something. Out of the ice.
Oh really?
Yeah. Yes, it was extraordinary.
Well, on that Christmassy note, because this is the penultimate episode before our Christmas episode. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Bye bye.
Are we finished? Oh my goodness. Bye bye. Happy Christmas.
Tune in next week for another exciting story from the files of Police Squad.
Although I'd see you as a Lib Dem, but I hope that's not an insult.
It's not an insult, but it's not a career progressor, is it?
No. It's a bit like being in the House of Lords.
You should have said that online, because it's such a good line back. And they do have the nicest club in London. I rather enjoy sitting underneath a big picture of Jeremy Thorpe and thinking,